you have to kind of get over that fear, because you can't make any money in this business unless you're independently wealthy if you don't borrow money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that stops a lot of people that are just not comfortable borrowing money.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Drew Pearson. You are listening to the Pearson Perspective. This is a deep dive into the stories and mindsets of successful business operators and investors. Let's go have some fun. All right, I'm really excited today. I've been looking forward to this conversation all week. I have Mr. Edward Rotenburg here on the show today. Before we get started, Edward, I'd just like to say thank you. You've really been a friend, but more than that, a mentor to me over the last 10 years or so. You've always been an ear I could call to talk and walk through deals. You've invested in some of our opportunities. So before we get started, I just want to say thank you for everything you've done.
Well, you're welcome. I've always admired you when you were young and starting off, and now I'm a partner in some of your deals, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, this will be fun. I don't know if you remember this, but I was always just the kid for probably 10 years to you. Hey, kid, what are you doing, kid? And at a certain point, I graduated, so I feel honored. But Edward's had a lot of success in real estate over the last few decades. Why don't you just tell us how you got started in the business?
All right. Well, I went to college in Dallas at SMU, and I was an average student at best. And in my senior year, I took a real estate class that caught my attention, and actually was one of the few times I paid attention and really tried in school. And then when I graduated, I came back to Baton Rouge, and then I didn't really have any official jobs or interviews. It was different back then, but my dad actually knew three different people. He knew an insurance guy, a banker, and a real estate guy. And he literally set me up and said, go talk to all three of them and see which one you like. And so I followed his advice, and I ended up liking, or was most interested in opportunity with a guy named Mr. Bob Durham, who was the managing broker at C.J. Brown back then, which is by far the biggest company. This was probably in 1984. And I had a relationship with him before, and he was a friend, and I knew his daughter and family. And anyway, he gave me an opportunity as a young guy in 1984, I believe. And then I went, and he asked me to come work for him, and I accepted the job, and that's how I started my real estate career.
Beautiful. And so it sounds like you started more on the sales side and worked your way over to the investing side. How did you have so much success in selling of commercial real estate? Because I know that was really a big part for you for a long time.
Well, let's see. With Bob, Mr. Durham was he was not a trainer, and he was a mentor, but really not even a mentor. He just pretty much threw me out there and said, good luck. But back then, and I'm sure we'll discuss other topics, there were no young people in this business. So, now it's a crowded field, and who's ever listening understands that this is the hot market and everybody loves real estate. But that wasn't the case in 30 years or 35 years ago. So I was like the only guy doing commercial real estate. Literally, if I was 22, no one was under 30. So I was kind of by myself, but the older guys were nice and kind of helped me out. And, Mr. Durham was the head guy, managing broker at Heidel Brown. And that's all there was back then. They were by far the biggest firm. So just kind of gravitated and got a few little leads, and started off slow for 1 or 2 years. And kind of by 86, I made a big deal, my first one ever in Port Allen, speaking of your area. And then that just kind of moved me to the next direction, and just became a successful regular broker before I ever got into the investment side.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And the investments is really what I want to talk with you about today. I've always been impressed. It seems like you kind of have a sweet spot. You seem to like industrial single tenant properties. Can you talk with us? How do you kind of think about investment decisions, or what really kind of scratches your itch?
Sure. Well, I would say, my soft spot is industrial currently, but I can promise you when I was younger and starting off, that was not the case. I mean, back when you were first starting off, we were retail centers, small office buildings on Sherwood that were affordable. So it wasn't always the warehouse world. We just over time moved from multi-tenant buildings that are a lot more effort and more tenants and more turnover to office warehouses, because yes, you're either vacant or you're occupied, but there's the turnover is not as much, and there's just less management intensive. So that's kind of how we focused on that particular asset and stuck with that.
Interesting. So just kind of trial and error, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, those are still affordable then, but that wasn't near as popular a long time ago. But the baby office buildings and the small little retail strip centers that we developed or bought or invested in, there were just so many of those, back in those deals from the Common Point on Sherwood where you could buy stuff for nothing. It was a different era. So it might not have been good rents, but the square foot prices and everything was so different. But over time, you realize that even if you got them at a good number, the tenants never stayed, expenses went up, and it was a difficult way to make money. So we moved to just over time, we started buying office warehouses, and we just realized that was a better for us. It made more sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I've experienced some of those pains in some of our properties. I know it firsthand. One of the things that I always struggle with a little bit is when do you sell? Real estate's great. It has a lot of great properties. You can pass it down. So essentially, you don't have to ever sell this stuff. You've sold assets over the years. Help me understand your thought process if you have one.
Um, okay. I don't know if it's really a thought process. I'm really not a seller. Every time I sell, I'm a reluctant seller. I get
Hmm.
disappointed because I put so much effort to buy it. But to continue doing deals, you got to move, if the equity is required, you got to move from one to another. So I guess I would say that when we do sell, or me individually or some partners, I would say the bottom up, we try to sell the buildings that are maybe older or less desirable area that we think is less desirable. It's not always correct, but and it's also money. If somebody makes you an unsolicited offer and it's not listed and it's a price that you would have no intention of think would ever pay for it yourself, and it gets your attention to think that that's something you should consider selling.
Hmm.
So
That
that's
makes
kind of
sense.
our philosophy. That I mean, we list property that we want to sell, but I'd say most of our sales are more direct. People come to us when it's for lease or an investment because they want to buy it versus we're actually trying to sell it, and then it gets our attention. And then we decide, do we want to sell it? Do we want to do exchange? Is this a good price, fair price? And if we're ready to take something off the table, we just kind of look at it and think it's a good idea or not. I bet you most of the sales we do are not actually listed for sale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely does. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned exchange, a 1031 tax exchange. Is that important for y'all? I mean, you say, okay, we're not going to sell unless we can 1031, or do you try to figure that out, later?
That's a good question. I would say it's not as important to me. Other friends and partners are like, they'll never sell anything unless they do an exchange, which that's their prerogative. I don't operate like that because honestly, if it's long as it's a long-term gain, it's roughly 20%. I don't mind paying my taxes because I don't
Mm.
want to go rush into some deal that's not worse than I have and be stuck with a new loan and just to save. I mean, it might be a significant tax, or it depends. But so I do exchanges, but I don't have to have it tied up before and have a commitment thereafter. I mean, occasionally we have it. We have something we have on our sites and we do it, but
Mhm.
not every not every deal I do is anywhere close to being always guided by 1031.
This show is brought to you by Pearson Partners, helping families create wealth through self storage. Self storage provides capital preservation, monthly income, and can lower your taxes. We have a team with over 60 years of self storage experience, and we can help you. To find out more, go to our website, Pearson Partners PE, sign up for our newsletter, or listen to other of our podcasts. It's important for me that you understand how we think and view the world, and this is a great place to start. Thanks so much for listening. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, I like that. I think that's one of my favorite things about you, Edward, is you've kind of simplified the game. It's a very complex game with a lot of people and players involved, surveyors and lenders and partners. Man, you kind of have some loose rules you follow, and it's really worked over the decades. It's really just a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, it's off the cuff. I would not say my system is I won't say it's unprofessional, but it's just not your standard corporate world by any means. I mean, it's very independent. and it's just me and a few guys, and it's not high tech at all, but we do have our own little system that we stick by.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, i- so, over the years, you were a broker and you've also gone on to start Siraj Rotenburg, a commercial real estate firm in Baton Rouge. Um, what was the impetus for kind of starting that firm, and what have you kind of learned about the people side of real estate over the years?
Let's see. Well, Siraj Rotenberg, we formed that in, I believe, 2011, and it was from a kind of a predecessor of a different firm that had kind of people had gone their different ways, and that Hank and I were friends and before, and he was looking to kind of get bigger. So anyway, so we teamed up, and hence that started the brokerage firm. And honestly, that was more we're friends, and we had some guys who were working together, and it's the brokerage side is definitely can be money can be made if you run it efficiently and good, and have good agents. But like everything, agents get high fees and expenses, and it doesn't generate a lot. But what I find in the vehicle of a brokerage company is your agents are always getting listings and getting deals, and there's opportunities. So I'd
Mm-hmm.
say the biggest thing about the owning a firm is you see, well, first you want to help your guys grow and buy deals themselves and be successful agents. But from an ownership, you see a lot of listings if you're interested. I did a lot more when I was younger than I do now. But when you own the company, it's just opportunity because there's so many listings in the office. I literally just left a sales meeting to come do your podcast, and they're talking about 5 deals that are out there, and everybody's going, "Oh, I like that deal." So when you have agents, you just hear about properties that other people may not hear first.
Right. Pipeline. That's sure it's a
Yeah,
great pipeline.
it's a pipeline, and then I am not actively involved in the. I mean, I'm involved in ownership, but I don't run it as that's not my specialty. Running the company, that's more for my partner. I'm more
Mm-hmm.
involved in the investment side and particular properties we own together. But the brokerage company, owning it is it's a natural start. You're an agent, then you become a broker owner, which is fun, and then usually that leads to start buying properties. It all kind of goes together, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah, it all kind of goes hand in hand. I think you're right. Baton Rouge, where you live, has certainly had a lot of growth over the last 20 years or so. And what have you kind of seen change in the business, maybe from a market perspective, or just the real estate market in general, over your career?
Um, well, I guess, like I said, it's been a long run, 35 years approximately. So, the market's changed. The area has definitely become different. I'd say half my life is spent in Ascension Parish, and I didn't hardly know where that was 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just my mentor and friend, guy I want to give him honor, Mr. Marcus Hirsch, who bought a bunch of land over in Ascension Parish, and I was his broker. We were friends. I've known him all my whole life, and then I was his agent broker for about 10 years, and then he started doing a lot of deals over there, and he asked me to come represent him, which I did. And then from there, I just learned that area, that market, and over time, he had developed Gateway and Ashland Road and a lot of successful projects. And then honestly, he was getting a little bit older, and his children were not interested in the real estate business. So that
Mm-hmm.
just kind of stumbled on that opportunity. So I started every year we'd buy some assets from him, me and a partner, a few different